The Grateful Fred Singers. Middle Creek? Okay, yeah.
How many of y'all have seen us before?
Yep.
Okay, because that lady, she knew all the words. I thought, if we ever needed, like a Jenny and Billy's, like if I fall ill, we might need to get your number. So, that was awesome. Well, I've spoken a lot about the coal mine inside of my family, but I haven't spoken at all about the moonshine inside of my family. In fact, my Uncle Harley, his moonshine still is in the little Crab Orchard Museum, Tazewell County. So if you ever find yourself in Tazewell County, Virginia, if you decide to go on that crooked road tour that you've heard about or whatever, and you stop off at the Crab Orchard Museum, then you can see the proud display of my Uncle Harley's copper moonshine still. This is a different moonshiner in my family, still on my mom's side of the family, just like Uncle Harley. This is my great-grandfather, Babe. Now, I never did know Babe. He died before I was born as well, but I always like to go back into family stories. I was talking to Pete, who's doing all the wonderful sound tonight. Thank you, Pete, for all that.
Yeah.
And he was talking about his great-grandfather, and it's neat to go back in there and see the kinds of things that you find. And so I thought, well, the way to get started on my great-grandfather, Babe, would be go to see his grave. And so I happened, even though he was my mother's relative, I happened to be up on Jewel Ridge with my dad. So I asked him, could we go up there and see Babe's grave? And he said, well, sure. And so we went on, up, further than I'd ever been on Smith Mountain. And we went past a place called Pea Patch, which is where you stop at the top of the mountain and you can see clear over to West Virginia. And in fact, there's a CD on the table there called Picnic in the Sky, and you see some people sitting on the ground having a picnic, and it looks like they're up at the top of something, and that's because they're picnicking up on Pea Patch, so you can kind of see what that looks like. And all the trees turn coniferous, instead of deciduous. And so anyhow, well, we went on past Pea Patch and finally went through several windy roads off dirt roads, and we got to this graveyard, and it was the most beautiful graveyard I've ever seen because no one was looking after it, you see. There were just these giant cedar trees that seemed like they'd been there since, as my grandmother said, God was a boy, and they had these long limbs, and they were hanging low and looking weary. And then there was this tall grass, and the bottoms of the cedar trees were just long enough to touch the tops of the grass, and they were swaying like this, and it was as though they were great brooms, and they were sweeping the grass around the graves, but they could only get down so far, so the grass had gotten really high. So we went on in there, and I started looking around those graves, trying to find Babe's grave. And I finally found it, and I saw beside him Mildred. And I realized that was my great-grandmother, and I'd never known her name. So I was saying the names out loud to myself, and I just went down the line beside them and started pulling the grass away from the graves. And after a minute, I realized that Mildred and 5 of those people had all died on the same day. And I said to my dad, what does this mean? And he said, well, I'm sorry no one's ever spoken to you about this, Jenny, but the thing is that once Babe was off on a trading trip, selling his moonshine, selling some timber, and he used to sell ribbons and fabric to people in their cabins so they could make dresses and things. He was off on one of those trips, and his cabin caught on fire, and his wife Mildred and 5 of their 10 children died in that fire. Well, I just thought this was awfully strange news because, see, I'd grown up with my grandmother, who would be the sister to those children who died and the daughter to Mildred who died, and never once had she ever told me how she lost half her family in a fire up there in that cabin on Middle Creek. But it did explain why sometimes she would give us money to go to the store to get some milk or candy or something, and she'd be laughing, and then we'd come home and she'd be so serious and you couldn't get near her. Because she was feeling sad. She was remembering, I think, what she lost. So I thought, well, I need to know more about this. So I came, and I was all ready to ask my mom about it, because it's her family. I thought, I need to know more. So I said, Mom, what was Grandpa Babe like? And she said, oh, he was just good for nothing. He was just broke. And she wouldn't say anything else to me about it. And I thought, ooh, because my mom's a very nice person, and she wouldn't really say that about anybody. So I said to my dad, why would Mom speak like that about her own grandfather? He said, well, Jenny, Babe was your mother's favorite person on this whole earth, and it's too hard for her to talk about him. So I thought, well, I'm not going to get anywhere there. So I did what you do when you want to learn something about one side of your family, you go ask the other side of your family. They tell you everything you need to know. So that's how I came up with the rest of Babe's story. And I learned that he lived for 20 more years after that fire, as did my own grandmother, the sister to those children who died. And she lived on even longer than that. And Babe became sort of like a spook up on the hill. He rebuilt the cabin up there on Middle Creek, and he lived in it all alone. And when children would come through the woods, and pass his cabin, it was like one of those haunted houses where you dare people to go up to the front door. And Babe's house was like that. That's how people thought of him in that part of the world. But for my mother, he was the whole world. And so, anyhow, that's how I came to write this song. And it's called Middle Creek. Grandpa Babe died while he was shaving. Took him 3 days before they found him out in the cabin where he lived up on Middle Creek, where the flies swarmed around his mouth. The day he died was 20 years since the fire that took Mildred, Vicey, and little James, and Brenda and Franklin there beside them. Well, they say since then they weren't the same. And it's hot, yes, it's hot up on Middle Creek, where peace comes slow to the wicked. And it's cool, yes, it's cool under the cedar trees, where the branches brush the grave of Grandpa Babe. He grew corn to make his moonshine. Mildred kept a garden out back of the house. He sold timber off the land and did some trading. He and Mildred held the place somehow. The old regulars, they spoke of retribution at the little church to which he never came. And they prayed, yes, they prayed for his salvation, that he'd burn his still house down and praise Jesus' name. And it's hot, yes, it's hot up on Middle Creek, where peace comes slow to the wicked. And it's cool, yes, it's cool under the cedar trees, where the branches brush the grave of Grandpa Babe. Some folks called him good for nothing, good for nothing. Some say he was just broke. But on that last day with his hand on the razor, well, I wonder, did he smell smoke? And I wonder, did he call to heaven? Call to heaven. Did Mildred hear her name? And when as
his heart seized up on him. Did he see Mildred and the children in Jesus' name through the flames? And it's high, yes it's high.